All right, it's talk time now. Nigeria's quest to attain socio-economic prosperity may have been stalled with the increasing rate of corruption. But analysts say corruption is alarming that Nigerians will have to unite to tackle the scourge.
And that's what we'll be talking about at this time, and our guests will be analyzing this with us. But first, let's listen to their comments.
The thing is that it is almost becoming our way of life. That's what I said. Anybody born from about 1965 has never known a better way of doing things. From kindergarten, people begin to steal. People begin to cheat in examinations. From kindergarten. So I mean, where is it going to end? So it's not going to reach you. I know it's our problem. But if we all agree, because I'm sure there's no sane person who does not know what is right and what is wrong.
In 2003, we were also voted the happiest people on earth, and at the same time, we were voted the second most corrupt country in the world. How you can add these three at the same time to one country is very puzzling, but that was the reality. It really matters a lot what we say here, but at the end, it will not be effective if our hearts are not right. What you do when no one is looking is the core of the matter.
It is expected that you can learn from the Word of God. You don't have to wait for someone to preach to you before you. All of us have known God, even apart from the kids, the small children. All of us that are grown up, we know that the fear of God is supposed to be there in us. It is because of God that we are surviving. So it is the fear of God that will regulate people's behaviors and make us to be right people. Without the fear of God, we are continuing to be like this. We are going to be corrupt. We are going to be even worse than what we are now.
All right, that's the background. We have joining us Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana. It's good to have you join us, sir. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
All right. Now, we'll go into the discussion proper, but let me take you to my wall. My wall is back for a brief background on how Nigeria past leaders have handled corruption, and then we come back to discuss with the legal luminary in here. Now, with the trend of events in Nigeria, it is clear that the fight against corruption may end any time or may not end any time soon, as successive governments seem not to have the right strategy to nip it in the bud from what we see every time. Many analysts have alluded that the rise of public administration and the discovery of oil and natural gas are two major events seem to have led to the rise in corrupt practices in Nigeria. Let's bring a few cases into perspective in here. Let's get into it. Now, if we go back in history, Chief Nnamdi Azikiwe was the first major political figure investigated for questionable practices in Nigeria, and that was in 1944 over financial transactions carried out in a bank which Azikiwe used to chair. Now, findings show that most of the paid-up capitals of the Africa Continental Bank, the ACB, were from the Eastern Regional Financial Corporation. Moving on. Now, in Western Nigeria, politician Adegoke Adelabu was investigated following charges of political corruption leveled against him by the opposition. The report led to demand for his resignation as district council head at that time. Now, these incidences were creating a kind of precedence, I must say, but they were certainly in little forms at that time. Now, in the northern region, the region did not entirely record huge corruption cases in the pre-colonial era, but there were allegations of corruption against some native authority officials in Borno State. The British administration was accused of corrupt practices in the results of elections which enthroned a Fulani political leadership in Kano. Let's move on now. We have, briefly, during the Yakubu Gowon administration, there were little or no allegations of corruption, probably because of the civil war at that time. So the searchlight was not beamed so much, and we didn't hear on the pages of newspapers so much about corruption during his tenure at that time. If we move ahead, during the Murtala Mohammed regime, many top government officials were relieved of their jobs, and that told us about his stance and the body language of the head of state at that time as to not wanting to have anything to do with corruption and keeping the system very clean at that time. Let's move on. And after him, General Olusegun Obasanjo's 1979 regime enriched a few politicians through projects that served as conduit for corruption at that time from all the reports we got that time. Remember the late Fela Anikulapo Kuti sang variously about these cases, including the ITT led by Chief Mko Abiola. Then the Operation Feed the Nation was also criticized at that time. If we move on to the next administration after that, President Shehu Shagari's administration as president obviously triggered public outcry of accusations of favoritism and corruption in the civil society, in the civil service.
And that was the major reason that Muhammadu Buhari gave then for overthrowing
he said
President
that the system was corrupt,
yes.
There was nepotism, there was favoritism and all of that, and it led to the military coup that led by General Muhammadu Buhari at that time. Here we have it. Now, Buhari's military regime brought discipline into the Nigerian economy. A lot of people have arguments about that anyway, but that is that. Now, a cross-section of politicians were convicted of corrupt practices. Some said the way it went about it was not civilized enough, and it was the argument at that time. But if we move on, let's see. Now, the regime after that, General Babangida's regime reportedly legalized corruption, where various privatization policies were used to reward his friends and associates. These were all reports that we got at that time. We have a senior advocate here to give us a perspective to all of this. Now, if we move on, we have, after that, Sani Abacha's military junta saw several million stolen and stacked in foreign bank accounts. Corruption reached an unprecedented height, and his death revealed the global nature of graft in the country. Now we hear of what they call Abacha loot. It has become an acronym or a lexicon, let me say, in the corruption world. Now, if you mention Abacha loot, every Nigerian knows where that is coming from. Let's move on. Now, General Abdulsalami Abubakar's short stint in office raised suspicion that he and his inner circle may have acquired quite a huge wealth in less than a year. But there were no proper records as to how it went down and who was responsible for what and all that. Let's move on. Now, various corruption scandals were recorded during President Olusegun Obasanjo's presidency, and some of the scandals that trailed his government included the Transcorp shares, national ID card scandal, and the alleged failed bid to allure lawmakers to concede to a third-term bid. It may be right to say that his government promoted corruption and later fought it by setting up the EFCC and the ICPC. Now, a lot of people say that the fear of EFCC is the beginning of wisdom, but it was under President Olusegun Obasanjo.
The Ghana must go phenomenon.
The Ghana must go phenomenon.
Made popular during President Olusegun Obasanjo.
Exactly.
How true that was.
Now, let's move on from there too. We're just trying to give you a background to all this so we can situate our discussion proper. Now, late President Umar Musa Yar'Adua's ascent and time in office was short. But although a fair number of corruption scandals from previous administrations came to light under his tenure and went uninvestigated due to lack of political will and poor health, I must say, but it was clear that his administration, fighting corruption was not generally the strong point of his administration at that time. If we move on, now, President Goodluck Jonathan's 6 years presidency pretentiously, if I have to use the word quote and unquote, fought corruption, but did not have a record of prosecuting any corrupt official. Rather, many corruption allegations have trailed his years in office as president, and he was quoted as saying that stealing is not corruption. And that generated a lot of debate across the world. Now, let's get into our discussion now proper. From all the records we have had, right, even before independence and until now, with every structure that is put on ground, every agency that is put on ground, every promise that's put on ground, is Nigeria really on the right track when it comes to really fighting corruption and reducing it to the barest minimum?
Well, if you look at your historical analysis,
yes,
one thing that comes out very clearly is the fact that every regime can be said to have engaged in corrupt practices. Maybe apart from the military regimes of Buhari and Murtala Mohammed, I don't think it was, the case of Babangida was a case of legalizing corruption. It was a case of institutionalizing corruption, which I think was consolidated under President Jonathan. But surprisingly, you didn't mention the fact that you did say that under the Gowon regime, because we just fought the war, there was no corruption. No, there was massive corruption. In fact, that was the basis of the intervention of General Murtala Mohammed. Accused the regime of corruption and that the new government was not going to condone corruption and indiscipline. But one thing that was very significant under the Gowon regime was that because the government was not prepared to fight corruption, the press then, unlike now, came out to lead the fight against corruption. For instance, I'm not sure you can remember or you have heard about this term, if you double me, I tackle you. At that time, all you needed to do, if you knew that a minister was corrupt, you would go to court, file an affidavit, stating out the corrupt practices, and the media then will pick it up and will feast on it until such a person was kicked out of government. And that was what happened in the case of Godwin Daboy. He was a businessman who alleged that a most powerful minister, in fact the most powerful minister then, Mr. Joseph Taka, had engaged in corrupt practices, and of course the government was not going to do anything about it. So the press insisted that this case must be investigated until the man had to leave government. Of course, you have the other cases like that. But one thing I want to tell you is the fact that corruption is ingrained, is part of the neo-colonial capitalist system we operate. Regimes can only attempt to reduce it, but it's part of the system. I mean, take for instance, even under President Buhari, right? Apart from the president, the presidency, talking about corruption, the National Assembly is in fact consolidated corruption.
Okay, let's come back to this.
The APC has 21 state government. Yes. None is fighting corruption.
Okay, let's come back to this shortly. We'll go on a break shortly, and then we come back to do more on this. It's getting even more interesting. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast.
All right, glad to have you back. It is still TVC Breakfast and it's talk time. And with us in the studio is a senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana. We're looking at fighting corruption in Nigeria. Really, you made mention of the states that the attention has been at the federal level. Why are the state governors not following suit?
I think whereas it is supposed to be the policy
All right, glad to have you back. It is still TVC Breakfast and it's talk time. And with us in the studio is a senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana. We're looking at fighting corruption in Nigeria. Really, you made mention of the states that the attention has been at the federal level. Why are the state governors not following suit?
I think whereas it is supposed to be the policy of the ruling party, the APC, but I think the way it's been handled, the leader of the party, that is the president of the country, has made it the business of the presidency. The National Assembly is not involved in their anti-corruption fight. No local government is involved. No state government is involved. And there is no way you can succeed. So what the corrupt elements in the country are simply praying for, well, 4 years will soon be over. We're going to gather forces and get this system out of our way so that we can go on with our normal way of looting the treasury of the country. And if you are going to fight corruption, and we have made this point repeatedly clear, apart from institutionalizing the anti-corruption fight, you have to look at the nature of the economy we operate. the economy will operate. It's like it's a kalo economic system, right? You have about 5 exchange rates now, 5.
Yeah.
So you are already building corruption into the system. So when you create scarcity, and what is this business about foreign exchange? Everybody wants dollar. For what? The majority
the
of
woman
our
that
people,
sells in the market
the
tells you about
majority of our people have never seen
what dollar looks
$1. What it looks like. But a tiny, infinitesimal minority of our people have taken over the country. And for them, what are you spending the dollar on? To import consumer goods. And then you waste the resources of the country. The election you just had in Port Harcourt, and not the elections taking place in the country. The ballot papers are imported either from South Africa or Spain or some foreign countries. Right? Our passports are manufactured in one of the Asian countries. And we're spending millions of dollars. And the government says we are promoting made in Nigerian goods. What kind of system are we running? So I'm saying that you're not going to get everybody on board if corruption has become part and parcel of our life.
System.
And it's not the business of the government. In any country that wants to fight corruption, you have to mobilize the people. This government has not gone to labor, to the student movement, to religious organizations, and the media. Now, this is what our country has lost.
You actually indicted the media, right?
Oh, yes.
Earlier, really. So,
oh, yes, because we are not in
media
those days.
culpable.
In those days, the media was the only institution fighting corruption in Nigeria. If you were found to be corrupt in government, the media will not let go unless you were forced to resign. But now, part of the money, you use it to bribe the media, adverts to be all over the place, and then some people are going to be accused of trying to bring you down because of your religion or where you come from. And the media must rise above that.
But can the personnel of the media rise above the ownership interests?
No. The ownership interest is there. But we also had owners at the time I'm talking about. The government was in fact the owner of the media then. But media people who did not self-censor themselves came out against the interests of the government. And no individual can be more powerful than the government. So the media must also let the publishers or the owners of this organization, sorry, this is what Nigerian people want to hear. And so we are going to expose corruption in the interest of our children, in the interest of all of us. Now we're all ashamed. Look at what has just happened in Ghana. I just listened to your program. We now have a situation where people distribute money to vote in broad daylight. Now we forget the fact that foreigners are in the country to monitor this election, and they report.
And they see these things.
Oh, that this is the most corrupt country in the world. So, and what is the government doing about that? I mean, you're just talking about Ghana. There was no holiday in Ghana. Everybody was going about their normal business. You cast your vote and move on. Now the US has to learn from Ghana now that the man who won the popular vote has been declared the winner of the election without any dispute. Whereas in America, Mrs. Hillary Clinton, who defeated her opponent by 2.6 million votes, is not the winner of the election. I don't understand what kind of democracy that is. So we must sit down as a people. Do we want to fight corruption, or do we want to make it the business of the government? What are religious institutions doing about fighting corruption? Why are you honoring people of questionable pedigree in your churches and mosques? For the media, for the bar association, why are we supporting corrupt judges? So we must take every organization, and the government must engage. It cannot be, the president is a man of integrity, the vice president is a man of integrity. That will not be enough. We must get the integrity to be part of the architecture of government.
All right. Now, when earlier you were saying that the president, as a leader of the party, is supposed to be able to influence the National Assembly,
yes,
the Governors Forum, and how would he go about doing that? In true terms, the Constitution is the only binding force as to what you should do and what I should do. Outside of that, how can the president compel?
No.
Okay.
As a leader of the party, this is the program of our party.
Okay.
Every member must cling to it. each of the state government, controlled by the APC, each of the legislators in the National Assembly that has been elected on the platform of the APC must be part of the anti-corruption crusade. But you can't have a situation whereby the president says, take for instance, payment of double salaries, which is illegal and immoral in a country where workers have not been paid for over a year or thereabout. I came out to say, no, you can't do this in this country. Not under a government that is fighting corruption. And the presidency is a statement to the fact that the president does not receive double salary. But that is not enough. Every minister must say that. Every legislator must say that. But right now, 21 senators who are former governors and deputy governors are receiving double salaries. Some ministers are receiving double salaries.
In any case, the president cannot rule alone.
No, the president cannot be the only man of integrity and his vice president. The president declares his asset, the vice president declares their asset. What of the other ministers? What of the other public officers in the country?
Okay, let's come back to this. Now, Nigeria's vice president is insisting that the fight against corruption is still ongoing before it kills the nation. Let's listen to him.
The truth, of course, is that without controlling corruption, there is absolutely no way that our economy or our nation will survive. There are some people who have been suggesting that perhaps we should slow down on corruption, slow down on this fight against corruption, as if government sits down and talks every day about corruption. That's not what happens. We don't hold meetings about corruption. We have decided there's a policy on corruption. We have empowered the appropriate agencies, the EFCC, the ICPC. We have empowered them. We don't control them in any way. They simply go out and do their work based on information that's available to them. And I think they've been doing incredible work lately.
All right. We just heard the vice president there. He said there's a policy on corruption and they have empowered the agencies responsible and all of that. But if we have to really narrow it down to these agencies, do they really have the capacity to fight corruption based on the policy on ground, based on the ideals?
With profound respect to the vice president, I think there is a lot of room for improvement. A lot has to be done. And while I concede the fact that the agencies are now working, they're enjoying a lot of autonomy now. But to what extent has each of the agencies keyed into the anti-corruption philosophy of the government? Take the Code of Conduct Bureau, for instance. It says, we're not going to make available asset declaration form. That is subversive of the war against corruption. And nobody has called the agency to order. How do you monitor those who have acquired wealth illegally if you do not have access to what has been declared by them and members of their family? So that's the problem. ICPC, yes, but a lot has to be done. The EFCC, the leader of the EFCC, the head of the EFCC, was appointed over a year ago, in November last year, in an acting capacity. All efforts have been made to frustrate his confirmation by the Senate. All efforts. Yet, this is the body that everybody is looking to when it comes to fighting corruption in all the states of the Federation, in all the local governments in the country. But corruption is fighting back very vigorously by saying, thou shalt not confirm this guy who could embarrass us. And that's what is going on. So the government has to bring everybody on board. If it's a policy of the government, this is the man we want you to confirm as the chair of the EFCC. But you can't just leave it to the Senate and governors to mobilize the Senate not to confirm Ibrahim Magu. And the whole idea is, let go somebody else who will just make noise there without doing the work.
Without doing the work. Okay. We'll come back to this. Let's go on a break and we'll come to dwell more on this topic. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast.
Very well, we are still talking about fighting corruption in Nigeria, and quite a lot of comment really has been going on here. Let's take that of the former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who believes corruption in the civil service is worse than it is in the political sector.
Because we found that, yes, political leaders may be bad and all that, say whatever you like about them, but the civil servants are even worse. So we decided to look at the civil service and purge the civil service.
Wow. Civil service, that's another area altogether. Now, when it comes to civil service, the corruption in the civil service, but really how bad can that be when the president comes to say, well, it's even worse than what the politicians are?
You know, like I've said, it's difficult to single out any institution. You talk of the National Assembly, you talk of the judiciary, you talk of the media, you talk of the civil service. It's the same game. And that is the point I'm making. If you have a system that encourages the primitive accumulation of wealth by few people at the expense of the society, and nobody is questioning them. In fact, we celebrate criminality, we celebrate corrupt people. What do you expect? They take their money into the political system. They've now gone to the extent of distributing money, you know, during election when you are voting. And the police, state security service, all of them want, you know, monitoring the election. Simply turn the other eye. And of course, they also take their own call. And nobody is asking questions. Now, what system are we in place? As if we are giving the impression that corruption has become part of our life. This thing, we didn't have this kind of, I think they started in Lagos, what they call Gemsoke, you know. I think it was around 2007 that became, you know, entered into our system. Now it's been, you know, become part and parcel of the voting system. Now, how can you say you have had credible elections when people are buying votes? Whereas under the Electoral Act, it's a serious criminal offense.
It is.
Nobody has been prosecuted. Now we're just talking of Ghana. Are we not ashamed that Ghana has had a wonderful elections? And I was laughing when some Nigerians said in the media, oh, President John Mahama has behaved like President Jonathan, oh, by conceding. These people know the history of Africa. Why do people believe that the history of Africa begins and begin and end with Nigeria? For the past 25 years, MPP has handed over government-wise in Ghana. MDC has handed over power in Ghana, quietly and peacefully. And this one, nobody is going to court on a care. So I think Ghana is making some progress. And we have to learn from that people mustn't distribute money. And it's the business of the government. This thing about rule of corruption, you can't fight corruption without institutionalizing the rule of law. In the West, and by the way, Western countries are more corrupt.
Because I was really going to ask that as to what role they are playing in.
Well, you know their own cases.
But sorry, we've had analysts here who have said that just like some people will blame what we have here on colonialism, that has gone and gone.
It's not gone.
Others are saying, why should we talk about the West? We have our own issues here, but what role is the West playing in the corruption issues in Africa?
Don't say colonialism is.
Okay.
What you now have is neo-colonialism. Right? If I have to go to court now, I still have to wear, you know, some foreign, you know, wig and gown and behave like a masquerade, you know? So don't say, even the language we're speaking.
You'd rather wear your dansiki and
oh yes,
yeah,
how can you say colonialism is fun? We now have it in a new system called neo-colonialism. The West. And then, of course, to dominate the entire world, you have imperialist control of the world. Yeah. Because they were no longer comfortable with the word imperialism. They now said it's globalization. But all is, you know, programmed to justify exploitation. In the midst of the grinding poverty in our country today, capital flight is going on. Money is being moved out of the country colossally. You have tax avoidance. The man who has just become the president of America.
Oh yeah. He said was being smart.
Donald Trump said, I wasn't paying tax, I'm being smart. You know? So tax avoidance is allowed by capitalism. What is penalized is tax evasion. but pay something. I mean, it doesn't have to be up to what you should pay, right?
Plea bargain.
Capital flight, shell companies, the US, Britain and others, allow people to set up shell companies. What you have seen in the Panama paper. Yeah. These are all legitimate way of looting the treasury of countries under capitalism. So when I talk about the neo-colonial version of the capitalist system that we operate, it allows for multiple exchange rates. In our own case, you don't have that in the UK or in the US. Here, in the West, corruption is the ruling policy of capitalism. In fact, capitalism is a euphemism for corruption. It's built on corruption. What do you do in the West? And that is the difference between the West and our country, or African country, or third world country. In the West, because the rule of law has become part of the political system, pray you are not caught. Whoever you are, once you are caught, the law deals with you and will sacrifice you to strengthen the system. Here, if you are caught and you are a big man or a woman, the law will be bent to accommodate your illegality or contraventions of the law. So that is different. All the money stolen here. I mean, I challenge Transparency International when they rate Nigeria as a corrupt country. I say, where is Switzerland? Where is the United States? Where is the United Kingdom?
That is where the money goes in the first place.
And I think the president made the point. I mean, I was in the seminar in the UK in June.
Fantastically corrupt.
Yeah, when this guy,
Cameron,
whose father's family name
was
appeared in
the
Panama Papers. Had the temerity, the moral temerity. I mean, morality. I mean, the arrogance to challenge Nigeria and describe Nigeria as a fantastically corrupt country. President Buhari very maturely said, yes, I know we are corrupt. However, give us our limited welfare.
Exactly.
And nothing has happened. That guy is gone now. With all his promises, David Cameron has not remitted a penny to Nigeria. President Obama will go in January. Not a kobo, not a dime will be remitted to Nigeria. Do you even understand something that the US has just done? Some money, I think about $400 million, has been forfeited of the Abacha loot in the US. The United States government has filed an objection to the application by Nigeria in Jersey, in the High Court in Jersey, United Kingdom, to have the money repatriated to Nigeria. The United States government is saying, give us the money. We are going to spend it on behalf of Nigeria. Can you imagine such, insult? And of course, our government is trying to challenge that. Switzerland is also supposed to have remitted $321 million to Nigeria. We said, no, we're not going to do it. Unless the World Bank is willing to monitor how you are going to spend the money. Can you believe Switzerland, where you operate coded accounts all over the world? I mean, in their banks, secrecy in their banks, so that money stolen from other countries can be warehoused by their banks.
Okay,
so,
let's look at the
anti-corruption. Nigeria is corrupt, and we are also we are apologetic about it, begging them.
Okay, quickly,
when we should be challenging them.
Okay. Let's look at the presidential, the anti-corruption committee set up by the president. Yes. And of course, we know it's been funded. Some development partners are giving money to that particular committee to come up with recommendations. Yes. And we're waiting to see really the effect of some of those recommendations. When will it take place? When will it happen?
No, I think the PACA, that's the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, headed by the renowned Professor Issei Sage, has done very well in terms of assisting the government to formulate an anti-corruption policy, assisting the agencies fighting corruption to acquire capacity, and also, having programs with civil society organizations, the judiciary and others, in getting everybody to buy into this program of fighting corruption. And they've just sent a bill to the National Assembly now, sponsored by the organization. Government has just forwarded a bill asking for the creation of special courts to fight corruption. Because if we don't do that, between now and 2019, we may not have succeeded in convicting many politically exposed persons. Because they take over the courts with the collaboration of some bad lawyers, you know, you keep your case in court indefinitely. And that's what has happened to our country. So we now need a special court, just like election petition tribunal, you know, that will devote sufficient time to the prosecution.
So why is the bill not getting accelerated hearing if it's before the National Assembly?
It's going to be difficult to persuade the National Assembly people to give it a hearing at all, not to talk of accelerated. They're not going to accelerate it for some of the reasons I've already made clear to you.
But let us assume that it goes through and it is adopted and it accented and it becomes law. If the courts are really set, the special courts for corruption is set, how effective or different will it be from the regular courts when the lawyers are still the regular?
No, the difference is there. And I take what has been done. Again, we must commend the National Assembly here that passed the Criminal Justice Bill into law last year. I can tell you, under Magu, the EFCC has secured in the last 1 year, and the records are there, not less than 200 convictions, including, surprisingly, and I don't know why they are not telling the public about this, politically exposed persons. The former DG of Nimasa was convicted and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. Four local government chairmen in Kogi State, 1 local government chairman in Kaduna State, a former commissioner for finance in Adamawa State was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. So you have made this kind of progress in the last 1 year because of that law. Under that law, you can no longer stay proceedings.
Okay.
You can no longer suspend your trial. So the courts are cooperating in applying the provisions of that law. 2, the anti-graft agencies, that's EFCC in particular,
yes,
is also working very hard to have more conviction. And I can assure you, maybe in the next few months, some of the governors who suspended their trial are going to have those trials concluded. So if you now have special courts like tribunal, election petition tribunal, where you assemble judges all over the place, in 6 months, all the election petition pending are dealt with before you go on appeal, that is the kind of thing we're talking about. If you have this special court, government has to fund the courts, and the courts have to deal with only corruption and related cases.
From there,
probably
I guess
special
Nigerians,
lawyers as well.
I guess
Do we
Nigerians
get special lawyers?
No, those lawyers, no, they will be helpless. Those who manipulate the system are already helpless under the administration of criminal justice.
I trust with this now, Nigerians can see the light at the end of the tunnel now for corruption, anti-corruption. Thank you very much, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, this is where we come to the end of today's edition of the program. Thank you for spending your morning with us. Tomorrow is going to be another time again for us to come dwell on other issues that concern Nigeria. I am Mike Okwoche. You can follow me on Twitter at @MOkwocheTVC.